Welcome to day 4 of the meeting. I think we had a fantastic dinner yesterday evening, really nice food, good company. So thank you very much once again to colleagues from the Commission for making that happen. Obviously, the main item on the agenda today is walking through the changes to the climate-related disclosures exposure draft, preparatory to coming to a vote on that. That's the main item. We've got a couple of points to bring back on natural resources that Edwin will just walk us through in a moment, and then literally we will just start and walk through the updated version of climate-related disclosures that was circulated by staff yesterday. And we'll just sort of pick up the points as we go through that. Obviously, we've got plenty of time on the agenda. So, really, we've got the space to just make sure we get things as right as we can, or we give, clear instructions in terms of this is the way that we want this fixed through the editorial process. And we'll literally just see how we go. So, I think, and then we've got the final bits on the agenda to work out. So I think without further ado, I will pass over to Edwin.
Thanks, Ian. So just a very quick slide summarizing the changes to the authoritative text. So essentially what I've done is go through the core text and looked up places where we have deleted the references to economic benefits and fair value or financial capacity. And this was done in July. So what I've done is reinsert those references. And then also where we talked about impairment, we removed all the references to cash generating assets back in July. So essentially all I've done is really revert those paragraphs to the June 2024 version, which talked about both economic benefits and service potential. And if a member wants to see the details, you can come see me, or you can look at the track changes version in July. That will really capture all the changes that I've made.
Thanks, Edwin. And that's just really consistent then with keeping that space open in terms of those other items that may or not exist where we've asked the SMC. So it's then coherent. So can I just check if there are any questions on what Edwin was proposing to do there? Okay, I think we're good with that. Thank you, Edwin. Said it would be quick. What we'll do is, are you staying there, Celine and Karen, or are you moving around?
They're going to move over.
Okay. Right, just give us a minute whilst Celine and Karen relocate. So obviously staff collected together the issues on the slides that were circulated yesterday. But I'm just thinking, do we want to, sorry, this is making up as we go along. I suppose I was just thinking that actually the easiest thing is actually just literally that we walk through. Does it make sense do you want to put the slides back up or?
Yeah, we could go through the issues and then do page by page.
Okay. Sorry, as I say, we're making this up as we go along. Yes, so this just, sorry, walk it back. So the suggestion is we just flip up the slides on it, how each of the issues have been dealt with. And at that stage, if members can raise any significant concerns in terms of the principle of how we've approached it, and then having gone through the three issues, then we will walk through the drafting. Okay, right. We know what we're doing now.
Thanks, Ian. So that starts us off with the first issue on own operations and value chain. And again, we won't walk through all of the different the paragraphs immediately now, but overall the principles and how we've addressed and addressed the issues on overlap and the instructions from the board from Tuesday and Wednesday. Were there any comments or issues with the principles and how that's been addressed?
Yep, Claudia.
Thank you. Thank you for the staff, for the excellent work they have done in delivering all the documents. I have only one remaining topic. I understood we had an overlapping, we have a blue circle and we have a green circle. We don't exclude anything in the blue circle. But how AG 1.82 is framed, it's misleading. We're talking about we excluding from the scope 3 the greenhouse gas emission of other entities and individuals from public sector programs. I spoke with Liang and she confirmed there wasn't never in the scope 3 of the blue circle. So we are not excluding it. We only make clear these are never in the scope 3. That's, I think it's misleading because now even if we are looking to the SMC, I think it's 3, we're also asking if we agree that we exclude from scope 3 the outcome of all those programs for other entities, individuals. In my view, it's the outcomes of other entities and individuals, doesn't matter if it's climate related public sector programs or other programs, are never in the scope of own operation in scope 3. And I think that should be made clear. Now it's like framed if it's in excluding a scope out of this topic, which it's probably not wrong, or which is not right.
So I think, you know, I saw nods in terms of people's understanding, and it's clearly that the drafting doesn't actually communicate that right at the moment. So I think what we need to do then is fix the drafting on this, but consistent with what you've just described.
Sorry, Claudia, can I clarify? Because I think what I tried to convey is the blue circle. Could you completely include blue circle, but there is an exclusion. And that's, I'm not sure I fully understand because your scope 3 are others, are related to other entities and individuals. And in your value chain, there are all those upstream and downstream other entities and individuals. And so that is part of your own operations. But what we're scoping out is for public policy programs. Well, if you're going to be providing those disclosures about public policy programs, the outcomes of your public policy programs, those emissions that are, I'd say downstream mostly for your climate-related public policy program, will be captured in the metrics that you report for your climate-related public policy programs. So we are excluding it from the disclosures in your own operations, but that's only for the downstream effects of your public policy program. So for example, if you have a subsidy program, my subsidy program itself will have all the subsidy recipients and the, say, manufacturers or whatnot that are, or developers that are going to be affected by your subsidy program. Those I would exclude from my just GHG emissions, scope 1, 2, 3 of your own operations, because we're saying that will be disclosed in your climate-related public policy program disclosures. Does that?
If this is what we wanted to say, then probably then the paragraph about the overlapping is misleading, because let's say we have some overlapping, but we didn't exclude anything. So I think it's a little bit, we should at least make clear for us when we talked about, we have a blue circle and the green circle, and we said we didn't scope out anything from the blue scope. That was the board agreed on. And now we say, no, only this part we scope out. Then we should really make clear what we agreed on, that we could finally draft them, our standards. So
I mean, this is basically about drafting, and I think it just underlines that we have to be very, very clear in this AG 1.82. And I think in describing this, we need to be clear what's in own operations and that is aligned with S2. We need to be clear about what we mean by the outcomes in relation to public policy programs. And then there may be an overlap, or likely there will be an overlap, but we just have to be clear about that as well. And I think the drafting just doesn't do that at the moment. So I think the instruction is we just need to make sure that it faithfully represents the blue circle, the green circle, and the possibility of an overlap, however that arises.
I agree on it, but I think we should, before we go the drafting, that we really make clear if blue own operation includes everything or not. We agreed on it include everything, so we don't have a scope out anymore. Or if we make a different decision that we say, no, this part we scope out, then it's also free, clear. I think that's the misleading in the moment. I'm not sure what we agreed on. So
I think we agreed there was no scope out. It's the blue circle, it's the green circle, and then we address any overlap. So, that I think basically we just got to make the drafting clear on that. And we need to make the drafting clear on that. Okay. Now, I'm not sure who was first, to be honest. I think it was probably Patricia and then Mari.
Thank you. It's the same question. And my suggestion to fix this is to specify the other entities and other individuals that are not considering in the own operations. Because when for own operations and scope 3, I have to consider the individuals in entities in the value chain. Then my suggestion here is to specify an entity with responsibility for climate-related public policy program outcomes would not include the emissions from other entities and or individuals out of the scope of entities value chain. Then I not consider so many entities, individuals, only in the value chain if the emission was material, or is material, sorry.
I think we need to be very careful about the placement of this guidance, and it strikes me that it may not help actually having the material in AG 1.82 in the material about own operations. We're probably better making sure that there might be cross-references into AG 2 material, but again, underlining that it's the blue circle and the green circle, and then we deal with the overlap. Actually, then we just need to think about what is cleanest in terms of the material. And the green circle is the area that is our guidance. Blue circle is essentially alignment with S2. So, you know, we can have a look at this, but I think the clearer we are that A1 application guidance, A1 is aligned with S2, and then people are clear about that. And then anything that's incremental in terms of public policy programs, there might be a cross-reference, but essentially from AG1, but essentially it's in AG2 because that's the public sector additional requirement. Patricia, back on that. I don't want to spend a lot of time going backwards and
No, my comment about materiality, it's not to be included here. It's only to explain why to my suggestion to fix, but not to include nothing about materiality here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mari.
Yes, thank you. I have the same concern with Claudia, and so I understand it depends on the drafting, and so maybe in case of the exclusion, it is so confusion for us, me, and it is maybe we agree the assumption that every public sector entity has an input, output, outcomes, and so the overlap, and so the exclusion is so extra exemption, and so there is so much inconsistency exists. Maybe the BC 35 and it mentioned about complementary, and it is true, and BC 22 separate disclosure requirements, and so we have to consider about the consistency to about the exclusion and inclusion. And thank you.
Thanks, Mari. Can you just give me one moment? I just want to check something off. Sorry, I just wanted to check that I think the confusion here is that all entities have their own operations. They all have their own blue circles. And in just picking up on the outcomes aspect of the green program, what we were trying to make clear is that we're just picking up on that information and reporting that in relation to the public policy programme. So it doesn't, what we're trying to do is make sure that the entity that's responsible for the programme doesn't think that it's also got to report all of the information that each entity's own operations. And I think that's, you know, it's just how we actually describe that, which is causing the problem at the moment. So that there is no, you know, it's just how we describe that. And therefore, I think what we need to do is think very carefully about how we do that to avoid the, you know, the confusion that's clearly been created by the board by talk of exclusions and so on, because we're not excluding anything from either the blue circle or the green circle. It's just about the fact that we're not reporting on everybody else's blue circle bits. We're just literally picking up the bit of their outcomes that is relevant in terms of reporting on the public policy programmes. So I think, you know, and the place to make that clear is in the AG2 material, because that's the bit where we're talking about public policy programmes. Okay, I will take a round of comments, but I think we're ending up in the situation where this is not actually clarifying. But anyway, Murray, are you still in on this? Renee?
I agree with you, Chair. What I just want to build on is that I think it's also needed in AG1 somewhere. If it's not 82, it's somewhere else. Because what we're trying to say in 82, it's the GHG emissions calculations of the entity for its own operations. As you said, we don't want the individual entity that may be a policy setter that looks at its own operations to start going out into all of the recipient of its services, right? Because a recipient of a service, like a student in a university, is the downstream, is like the client, it's like the customer, right? The GHG protocol was written for the private sector, for commercial entities, a lot more than for the public sector. So the downstream effect, they want commercial entities to look into their customers, into the downstream, into the end of life of a product. So what does this mean in the public sector? We want to try to limit it. We don't want to go into the downstream impact into the recipient of services. That's what we're trying to do here. That's why we're calling it an exclusion. But to your point is to not confuse. We don't want an entity to go into others' GHG emissions in their scope, in an entity scope 3. That is down at the scope 3 calculation level. It's linked, but it's not necessarily the same as what we're trying to articulate as the overlap at a broader level in our standard between the two streams of our standard. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. I mean, it does underline that ultimately there's going to need to be the equivalent of the IPSASB guidance, which actually does talk about what, you know, how the greenhouse gas, you know, how all of this applies in detail for a school and so on. But that's not for now. So we just need to indicate what we have done and what we haven't done. And ultimately what we're doing here is we're getting the discussion out about the principles. Okay. Can we move on then? So I think the principle is basically the incremental stuff, though we need to make sure, whilst there might be a cross-reference from the AG1, that the detail is in AG2. Okay. Anything else on own operations and value chain? Right. Can we move on to the next one then, please?
On the next item, responsibility for climate-related public policy program outcomes. So the updates reflect the change in the focus coming out of Tuesday and Wednesday discussions, that the entities that would provide the disclosures about climate-related public policy programs and their outcomes are those that have responsibility for those outcomes. So the focus on the outcomes. And so that is reflected through the core text, AGs, BCs, and some updates to IGs and IEs. And yes, and some clarification. I did get some comments on the BC about how responsibility includes accountability. So that wording we will work through, but. Any comments or issues on the principles and how those have been updated and reflected in the drafting?
Comments from members? Jenna?
Yeah, thank you. I think yesterday when we were looking at this on the blue circle and the green circle, I don't know whether AG 2.3 restricts those disclosures only to those with responsibilities and not those implementing the activities. Because I thought we had agreed that those who are implementing those activities should report the outputs so that those with responsibility can pick it up and disclose them further. Thank you.
Good deal. Okay, Joan, I think you're thinking of whether the disclosures should be provided by those who implement policy programs as well. I think coming out of the discussion with the focus on responsibility for outcomes, the discussion the group had Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday afternoon, I can't remember. The shift to focus on outcomes takes it away from somebody who is just purely implementing and executing a policy. If they've got a mandate just to implement, then they like that link back to outcomes may not be there. So the focus is on who has the responsibility for the outcomes, which would typically be, say, they have and if you AG 2.8 outlines the factors like they're legislated to be responsible for the program. They have responsibility for the design or accountability for consequences. So an implementer may have those. They may be doing multiple roles, but if you're purely executing or taking a mandate to comply with a policy, then you would be excluded. But I think we would defer, to those factors for an entity to assess if they have those responsibilities.
Back on that. I mean, I think in resolving this, we have to be very clear that you have to only provide those bits of disclosure that are relevant in terms of the outcomes, and we're not going further. And I know that, I mean, we have to make sure the drafting on that is absolutely clear, because overall, this will be a concern that these are, there's incremental requirements here for public policy programs. So we need to be very clear about, we're just asking for the minimum on this, not extending it. Is that okay? Okay. Renee.
I actually had a comment related to this as well. When I read 2.8 A, B, C, D, I was left on my appetite about the implementation. So I was thinking the fact that the act of implementing a program is not directly linked to being accountable for the outcome necessarily, right? And I thought that maybe we could add a paragraph just to clarify, just to articulate that, maybe below 1.8 or as part of 1.8, that implementing could be delegated or not, and is irrelevant in terms of the entities being responsible for the outcome, right? Irrespective of whether the entity implements itself as a policy setter or delegates implementation. Implementation becomes whoever the implementer is, their own operations. So that's how I understand it. And I thought maybe here, I felt there was a bit of more articulation needed to explain that principle here.
It sounds like there probably is something, because I think that would address the clarity that I think Jonah was looking for. So I think we need to think very forensically about where that concept comes in and how we use these paragraphs just here to articulate that. Also, potentially, we may want to use the diagram at some, anyway, I think we need to think about it and not add text for the sake of it, but just make sure that the text that we've got does the right job. Okay, so I think we've got that sort of question, and I think the instruction is just to make sure that we clarify. Okay, any other points on this slide? Right, so move us on then to item 3. Karen, that's you.
So for item 3, risks and opportunities, we've overall we've clarified that this is in challenge is this in many cases a part of the broader risk management process, and then we've also made that split. So for strategy and decision making, we'd have we'd have anticipated challenges, but then in managing the outcomes, there you may be managing those anticipated challenges in addition to those that were unanticipated, for example, during policy implementation. There are quite a lot of changes because this is a pervasive concept through the drafting, but they are minor edits. Are there any concerns with how we've addressed this principle?
Patricia, and then Andrew.
Thank you. About metrics and targets, the text continues to require the information about gas emission. I think it's the principle is general. The principle is about metrics, and when a metric was gas emission, it required the kinds of information. I have sent my comments for staff. My suggestion is to change the order, include the metrics as general, and after that, require the information about gas emission, where gas emission is an outcome for the program, selected by the entity for the indicator for the program. My suggestion is to invert the general in general to say about metrics, and when the gas emission as when is a metric, then need to disclose information in the guidance. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. So I think what I'm just going to do is I'll take comments from the other members and then we'll come back to staff. So I've got Andrew, then Liang, then Claudia, and then I'll go back to staff to just clarify where we are on this. Andrew.
Thanks. It was just looking at the disclosures of unanticipated challenges. I think in some areas we're asking for disclosures that I'm not sure entities would know how to provide. So we ask, how would you manage or address the unanticipated challenge, which if you don't know what the challenge is, you can't really provide. So I think it's what we're trying to achieve here is how would you monitor and assess whether there are unanticipated challenges and sort of that process. So I think it's just shifting that focus one back. So I've sent the updates to staff, but just wanted to highlight that change in focus.
Yeah, agree, Andrew. I think that it's not that it's something different, but it's just how it's described. And as you say, yeah. Okay, Liang. Oh, I think that was probably Claudia's point as well. Okay, Liang and then Renee.
I raised this point for this item. Actually, it is not related to risk and opportunity, but related to the outcome of PPP. I raised here because I think here we refer to paragraph 12, and this may be the most relevant item in the whole paper for me to raise this item. Actually, in the past several days, a question is always in my mind. Will is the disclosure requirement for the outcome of PPP in our whole document, other than those metrics and the target, as stated in paragraph co-text, paragraph 26 and 27. We have a very solid definition for outcome of PPP. We can see the document, page 12. We have said clear that the outcome of PPP include the impact, not exactly wording, but something like the impact to ESG. In my mind, it means the impact to outside. But when I look at such as page 46, age on outcome of PPP, we also refer that the outcome of PPP is something the outside impact on ESG. Again, it is the impact to other entity, other individuals, and also page 51, age 2.30. This is the AG for Cortes paragraph 12. Also consider external factor when you disclose the financial implication. And also page 88 BC 45, BC for the outcome of PPP, that give examples when you consider the outcome of PPP, you should consider the outside impact. And also page 95, BC 82, this paragraph required to disclose the financial impact of other entity. My point is that we have such a solid definition, and in our whole document, we also emphasize again and again the outcome of PPP should be the outcome, outside outcome of other entities and individual impacting the ESG. But actually, when go to the detailed disclosure requirement, actually, other than the metrics, such as the emissions, we have no any detailed disclosure requirement regarding the outcome. I'm fine that we do not require the disclose of the financial implication of other entities because maybe it is hard to do in practice. But in my point of view, at least we should have some disclosure requirement that for a PPP that you have responsibility, you should give some qualitative information about if you run the PPP or other entity, other individual runs the PPP, what's the impact on ESG, which is consistent with our definition of outcome of PPP and other AG or other BC in the whole document. This is my point. Thank you.
So I can see the point you're making there, Liang. I think we walked it back in terms of not putting specific requirements in because of the discussion that we had in the SRG, where we were very much being advised not to pin it down too tightly because of the you know, the early stages really of this. And so I think maybe what you're saying here is actually you think it would be helpful to have something. And what I'm wondering is actually whether the way to address your point is actually to say, in BCs, we haven't done it for the reason that we had the discussion in the SRG, but actually to ask people, would it be helpful to have more detail, you know, and if so, what? Because I think we're not going to be able, the part of the problem is A, the state of development, and B, the range of potential climate-related public policy programs. And that was what really actually drove us to pull back from detail at the moment. Yeah.
But I think this is a big omission if we say our requirement, our disclosure requirement is on the outcome, regarding outcome of PPP is limited to the emissions or other metrics. Actually, maybe I can take a simple example, which is similar to AG or BC's example in the document, such as we have Ministry of Transportation, and it runs some plan, some PPP that it should exchange or vehicles into some clean energy vehicles. Actually, if we look at our definition of outcome of PPP, this is kind of that one of the outcome may be because all the transportation sector that they need to change the vehicles into such as clean energy vehicles, that it may have some other impact, such as to the workers or to the plants of those vehicles, because you have change your production line. In my mind, this is exactly what the outcome of PPP, in addition to the emissions. I agree, we may not require to have some very quantitative financial impact of the outcome. But in my point of view, I think maybe at least we should require some quantitative information about the outcome. And I also referred to the GRI ED on climate change. Actually, it does not have very, very detailed, but generally it say such as you have a transition plan of climate change, you should disclose the impact on ESG. I think in simple way that we can make reference to this way, and at least to put this into our drafting. Otherwise, it looks like that the whole document and the whole disclosure requirement is quietly, substantially inconsistent with the definition of the outcome of PPP. Thank you.
I think it's quite hard to make a change like that at this stage, actually. I can see if we go back into the objective where we talk about the effects on society, environment and the economy, I can see that we could be clear in terms of requiring the disclosures to address the relevant parts of those for the programme. I could see that we could go as far somewhere in IG, or maybe we explain it in BC that we have in mind those things. And then I think we have to ask an SMC on it. I really don't think we can specify that sort of level of detail in the core text at the moment, or the AG, but I think that probably bridges it if at least we have some reference to the overall things, and then in the non-authoritative guidance we give those examples. I mean, I recognise this is really difficult, and I recognise you have a strong view on it, but I don't think as a board we've actually debated that, and I think it's quite pervasive at the moment, and it's also, we're walking a fine line with the advice we've been given externally not to pin this down at the moment. So I think that's probably as far as we can go at this point in time, and we ask an SMC.
I agree that we can have a SMC to state clearly, all of this. And in addition, we need to fix all the inconsistency in the whole document. I think to have a SMC on this maybe is a workable solution at this stage. I'm fine on this.
Okay, so I think the instruction to staff then is to fix the inconsistencies that you've identified, and that would be consistent then with the general objective, and then we ask an SMC. Okay. Celine.
Yeah, no, I want to just point out your point is well taken. I think we have, it's come up and down. So there have been comments raised, I think, even when we were reviewing the IEs and IGs. And we did even in some of the IEs, we expanded it to include other ESG outcomes in the assessment. So IE 39 to 43, talking about identifying your outcomes for policy programs. We've included some other ESG type outcomes in there as well, not just climate focused, but we can work through and flow through more consistencies as needed. But we did bring it into some of the non-authoritative text, and it is in our BCs as you suggested.
Okay, so in implementing this, I think, Liang, you've identified the areas where you see the inconsistencies in drafting. So we need to fix the inconsistencies in drafting in the core text, as well as then those detailed references that Celine's just picked up in the non-authoritative. So it needs to be consistent. And then we ask an SMC on it. Okay, Renee?
I wonder if my comment or observation is gonna build on Liang's one. So in relation to how we've dealt with not wanting to confuse risks and opportunities on the own ops side and on the PPP side, we dealt with this with using challenges impacting outcomes. And I think in doing so, a challenge impacting an outcome is a challenge that it impacts the delivery or the implementation of your program. So we're in the project management or program management space, if you think of a life cycle of a public policy program. And when I think of the risks and opportunities that are impacting an entity's strategy, we're not in the project management of a program. We're at the very outset, we're at the beginning, we're at the design of a program and the identification of those risks and opportunity. I'm going to keep it at risk. So let's say if we just focus on climate-related physical and transitional risk, what are those risks that as an entity that are outside in this external environment that may impact for own ops, my operations, right? So in the logic is that under ONOPS, we're using external risks to then develop my strategy. And my strategy is going to have outcomes which are going to help me decarbonize my operations or transition to net zero. So that's at the ONOPS. If you take the same logic at the PPP level, I think what we're missing is a policy setter. How are they identifying those risks or those factors that they use as input in their decision-making to design the program, to select the program? And I think it's in a strategy where we could maybe articulate that. We talk about objectives of the public policy program. So the objective of it, I think, implies that we're trying to address something like a physical risk, if it's flood risk, if it's decarbonizing the buildings in the whole jurisdiction. So I think we could fix it in strategy and maybe in risks and opportunities, because there I find one of the unintended consequences. We're talking about project management, the challenges in how a project could not achieve its outcome. So I don't know if I'm clear, but if we articulate the objective, then that will help maybe Liang in articulating. I mean, the outcomes need to be linked back to the original objectives we're trying to address with a program.
Thanks, Renee. So I think some of this also resonates with that discussion about anticipated and unanticipated, because in designing the program, then you would anticipate some of the challenges are going to be and then real life intervenes. Ross.
Struggling a little bit on this one to whether we're actually doing principles or rules, because I think Renee, I understand what you're saying, but if we're asking entities to disclose the nature of their public policy programs, isn't it inherent that they would describe what they're trying to address? And I mean, if we want to write rules then and tell them you must do A, B, C on everything, then I think we could do that, but we've taken a principled approach. So if the intention of the disclosure is to talk about your public policy program outcomes, I would expect in following the principled standard, they'd use some judgment to give some flavor to what they're addressing without us having to say it. And I think at this point, we're riding an interesting go round on some of these points where we're trying to be super specific on some things and principled on others. And I think that could end up being very confusing for people to understand where we're going. So I think personally, I wouldn't go much further on this point.
Celine.
Thanks, Ian. So I think when we were reviewing the term risks and opportunities, we were reflecting on the different types of risks. What does risks and opportunities mean from a policy perspective? And in the same way, I think, as Renee was thinking, we did think about those risks that you think about when you're developing your strategy, and then the risks that you think you have to manage to make sure that you achieve your outcomes. And so Renee's put this piece on the risks that flow into your strategy. We tried to capture in those paragraphs in AG 224, I believe, and just talk about it as part of your objective, that these are the risks that I've identified that I'm going to be addressing, and that the factors and the trade-off decisions you're making may capture all of the different analysis that you've done. And in AG 225, recognizing that you may do some scenario analysis that will all feed into your ultimate decisions around that policy. So I think that we did consider it as we moved away from the term risks, and that's how we've captured it. So maybe to better articulate that in the AG 224, 25, 26 paragraphs, that could be one way to address it, that issue from a strategy perspective, to to not ask folks to tell me all about all the risks that you've identified, which was what the starting point was with S2, tell me all of your material climate related risks and opportunities. But to incorporate that into your disclosures more generally as you talk about your objective, your decision making to set your policy.
Yeah, I think thanks for directing us to AG 224, Celine, because I think when you read that, actually it is all under the heading of strategy and decision making. And it seems to me that it's doing everything there that actually you're looking for, Renee. I just don't think at this stage that we need to try and tie it down more. You know, because it is under that overall heading of strategy and decision making, and just looking down the list of things that you're being asked to do there, I think you get there. So I think if it's okay, we'll just not be more, try and be any more explicit at this stage. Lynn.
Thanks. I think sometimes it's easy not to put your flag up when you actually agree with the drafting and are comfortable with the drafting. So I guess I put my flag up to sort of say, when I went through the entirety of this document yesterday afternoon, there was a word here or a word there that I thought could be improved. I guess some of the discussions we're now having, we could be in danger of trying to anticipate every single comment that we might get back before we put this document out and ask people for comments, and then try and fix everything that we might possibly be able to see that we might get back. But I guess I wanted to say, actually, I thought the drafting was good enough on all of the topics that we've discussed so far, that I would be more minded that we don't spend a lot more time other than minor editorials. I would be in support of accepting minor editorial changes and getting this out. I guess I'm just slightly concerned in the discussion if we take more substantive points into the drafting and then I read the more substantive points, I might suddenly have a different set of comments that I didn't have when I read this document through from beginning to end yesterday. So I just wanted to sort of put my flag up and say, look, I really, a word here or a word there change editorial. It's all the comments that I had on it. And I was sort of in favor of us, let's move to finalize it. I know it's not going to be perfect, but that's why we need to get it out there and get comments back. We can't sit around this table and anticipate every possible comment we might get back and try and fix it in the drafting. If we take that mindset to it, we'll never get this document out.
Thanks, Lynn. I think that's a very helpful exhortation to colleagues, just in terms of this session, that we really need to just look at it from a fatal flaw lens. Is there anything that really is wrong with it at this stage? Because colloquially in English, we have a saying, don't let the best be the enemy of the good. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, Lynn, that it's good enough at the moment to get the debate going and we need to get the argument out there, which is what we've been saying all the way through. Okay. So is there anything else on the risks and opportunities slide with that lens of, is there anything really wrong with it at the moment? Renee?
I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. So maybe what I would like to do is just go back to the SMCs on risks and opportunities and just rereading them, just to see if maybe we can just be more explicit in asking our constituents whether we got this right. But I totally agree. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so is there anything else then on the items?
So those are the three, the items, the key issues. And then there were the page by page comments that we took on Wednesday. And so, and if we can, if there were any general comments, or we can go into the page by page.
I think at this stage, let's just go into the page by page. And again, back to Lynn's exhortation, you know, if there are minor edits, we can take those offline. What we're looking for here is any major flaws that board members see that we need to fix at this stage. Okay, so Ross will walk us through the document. We will come back and have a look at SMCs after we've gone through. I think therefore we're starting at page 9 on the markup version.
Yes, so starts at the top of page 9 with objective. And then we move to scope, which is paragraph 3. And then we move to page 10, where we get into definitions at the bottom. Page 11. Into page 12, which continues the definitions. Page 13, where we get into governance. Page 14, where we start strategy. 15, risk and outcome management. 16, metrics and targets. 17, 18, 19, 20. That brings us through the core text into application guidance 1 on page 21.
Yeah, Mike.
So just slight comment on that. I think we discussed this yesterday. You might call it editorial, but what about that thing in AG 1.3, that information education? I think after we have streamlined our draft, it seems to be a little bit for me that education is really a subcategory of service design and delivery. So therefore, my suggestion would be leave B out.
Everyone okay with deletion there? Okay.
So into 22, 23, 24,
Patricia.
23, the paragraph AG 1.17, there are some requirements here. It's not so aligned with on operations. My suggestion is to review this paragraph because it's more about the policy program than the on operations.
Okay, so you're proposing we move that into an appropriate place in AG2. And I think that's right, that we just need to focus this on aligned, and then the incremental requirements come in AG2. Okay. That's that.
so back into 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. That brings us into Appendix A2, Application Guidance for Public Policy Programs. On 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53,
Tricia.
Item G in the AG 2.37. It's not about outcomes. My suggestion is to delete this. AG 2.37. That it was in item was included about remuneration. This item about remuneration is not about the content in this EG.
Celine, back on.
Yeah, so this came out of the discussion yesterday from the board. That if we have remuneration discussed in own operations, we also have it in public policy programs. And so instead of, our approach for policy program metrics was an overall greenhouse gases or other, to leave it open and non-prescriptive. So rather than adding A, B, or C, 3 types of metrics you would include and having remuneration upfront in the core text, it could be a potential other metric. But that was coming out of yesterday's discussion that could it be possible, you leave open the possibility that there could be remuneration tied to public policy programs. I see your point. It's not a metric that's performance, that's measuring the performance of an outcome but could be a relevant metric that the entity monitors or the entity that users would be interested in to ultimately.
I mean, just to underline, this was a consistency point that Lynn raised, and that's why explicitly it's been put in here. Tricia.
Disclose about public policy program is related to outcomes. And if I decide to disclose about other dimensions of the program, I agree, retain this, but it's not the case in this stage of this project. Remuneration, I think, is more in operational, in own operations. Remuneration for because this item is about remuneration for remuneration of key management personnel. I think it's so far for the outcomes analysis. This is my suggestion to delete this.
So I still think it should be in. I don't mind if you change the wording to add the word outcomes in there somewhere, if that is helpful. But it seems wrong to me that if in your own if part of your in own operations you are disclosing where remuneration might, you haven't given yourself a public sector reason to take it out of own operations. If part of the remuneration is decided and is linked to public policy programme outcomes, then you should disclose that remuneration, in my view. I've got no problem with adding the word outcomes, if that helps. But I do think that it should be disclosed, given that we didn't have a public sector reason to depart from disclosure on own operations.
Thanks then. So if we substitute outcomes for consideration, sorry. Yeah, so if we put outcomes there instead of considerations, I think it works. And I think that's the bridge on this one. And also, you know, this is permissive rather than mandatory. So I think at this stage, if we can go with that, that bridges to the two positions. Okay, Lizvi.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is on paragraph AG 2.38 C. I think we should also require the disclosure of what those anticipated and or unanticipated challenges are and their effects, instead of only the effects of those anticipated and or unanticipated challenges. So it would be then, I suggest that it would be then worded as the unanticipated and or unanticipated challenges and their effects towards the achievement of climate-related public policy program outcomes. Thank you.
Karen?
Yeah, sorry. No, I think we would already require the entity to disclose information on those anticipated challenges and identify them and identify the unanticipated challenges too. But what we could do is to link those two paragraphs more. So for the metrics that are required, we would link that to what was disclosed in strategy and also in risk and outcome management too.
Can we just be very careful about adding a lot more words in? I'm not sure I actually see the point, to be honest. I mean, I don't mind moving the effects wording down the paragraph, but I think anything more than that at this stage, I would counsel against. And again, it's in that theme of let's just not try and tie this down too far. Okay. Can we move on then, please? Patricia.
It's another point. It's paragraph AG 40. Paragraph said if an entity discloses a metric take from a source other than this standard. Other than this standard is the gas emission metric, or because I couldn't understand, because for public policy program, the entity set the metrics that each you use. Then for me, it's not, maybe in some moment in this project, the idea is to connect with gas emission. And then it's okay, it's other metric than other than gas emission. But for me, it's not, I could not understand other than, because in the PPP, the metrics is open. The entity tools, the entity set the metrics. Thank you.
Celine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're not pinpointing metrics and we're not pinpointing sources. An entity could develop their own, but it is an evolving space. So I think we're, in my mind, leaving it open that there's more and more benchmarks and sources that will be available. It's particularly in the other metrics, I think, because GHGs, we've already pointed to GHG protocol and there are established methodologies. But there are other sources like the UNFCCC has a number of databases or they have methodology guides on developing your metrics for your policy strategies. So I think that I would just leave this open. We don't have to answer what is the other source. But to make that available, if you're using another source, then to let us know what the source could be. I don't know that entities could make their own, but they could also be looking at other frameworks and
Yeah, I think this is what you've just said is relevant in terms of own operations, but I think Patricia's point is that actually what we're saying is actually on public policy programs, the metrics are set by the program and therefore that's what we're reporting on. So I think the point is, your point is well made in relation to own operations, where we wanted to say, okay, use greenhouse gas protocol, but you may already be using something else. So that's permissive in terms of own operations. Here, Patricia's point is we don't need the AG 240 because we're already setting the metrics, however that is for the public policy program. So I think it you know, we're consistent with the discussion that we had, but that's in AG1 or in the core text. But here we don't need AG 240.
then AG 239 is linked to that. It talks about other sources an entity may consider. Or we take, though they're two together. These are other sources you may consider. If you do use another source, then disclose it. That's AG 239 and AG 240. So do we think, are you suggesting that we take up 39 and 40 or just 40? You can consider other ones. You don't need to disclose it. Just take out AG 240. Because I think that the concept still applies to policy programs.
So can we, have we got that drafting in AG1 for own operations?
No. It is taken from S1. It's not in S2.
Sorry.
Yeah, this drafting around other sources and thinking about other sources is leveraged from S1. It's not in S2, so it's not part of AG1.
So, but I think going back to the discussion that we had, so just on climate, right? S2 mandates that you use the greenhouse gas protocol.
So this is in relation to metrics other than greenhouse gas protocol, other metrics. Other than greenhouse gases.
So I'm just trying to work out what the location that, so if we're just focusing on own operations, right? Do we need, because we had a discussion in the board on this, so is that relevant in terms of own operations?
This is not relevant in terms of own operations. I think in own operations, because S2 has explicit, they have a list of different metrics that you would provide. Greenhouse gas protocol, the percentage change to your assets or your business activities due to these climate related risks. So they have an extensive list. So they don't include this type of general, think about other sources of guidance, other metrics you would provide. This is what we brought in from S1 to public policy programs because we're providing a very open, non-prescriptive approach to ask people to provide other metrics. So these two paragraphs are saying you could be thinking and looking at other sources of guidance to develop and determine your other metrics other than greenhouse gases. And so if you do choose to use another source of guidance, then disclose what that source of guidance is.
Patricia,
When a entity develop or design its program, the entity can use indicators from some framework, for example, SDGs. In this case, the entity should disclose this fact that use, for example, SDGs framework to establish the metrics for the programs. But normally entity set the metrics for the program and consider this metric for the evaluation of performance and for evaluation the challenges, not others. Maybe we need to revise the paragraph 39, because paragraph, in addition to considering established metrics that the entity already reports on its climate-related public policy programs. It's not, it's, if I started to disclose about a lot of indicators, I can obscure the information about the program. I think I understand your point, but I think some editorials in relation to AG 239 and 40, I can conciliate.
can I suggest the way through this is I think we just move the discussion that's in A 239 into basis for conclusions, because it's actually, you know, it's not a requirement. It's actually a discussion about how the metrics that you might consider and how you do it and all that kind of thing. And I think so I think if we just say review AG 239 and AG 240 in terms of just moving that discussion into the basis for conclusions. And then we capture the thinking that you outlined, Celine, but it's actually, you know, it's actually just then it shows you which other sources and so on, rather than having it in the application guidance. Lynn?
I'm a bit hesitant on that because it's not just a discussion in AG 2.39. It does direct you to consider some particular sources, and I just feel a little bit concerned about moving all of that discussion to BCs and leaving it entirely open-ended here with no guidance whatsoever on the sources you should consider. So it's a bit.
Okay, so I mean, I think if we say we'll leave it here, but we just finesse the drafting to get Patricia's sense over, and it's between 239, and if we get 239 right, then we may be able to remove AG 240. So can we just leave it at that? Because, you know, this is not going to help going further. I think we get the sense of what you're saying, Patricia, but I recognise the point that Lynn is making. And I think the point that you originally made was that AG 240 is redundant, but then when you look at it, AG2, it's how the start of AG 239 is couched. Okay. So I just think we're fighting to agree on this one. So can we just say that we will remit that one to the editorial group to just resolve that bit of drafting? Okay, so carry on into them.
So that takes us through the authoritative text.
You actually didn't cover the last page. Okay. So my question is, we took out we had a discussion about the last paragraph, which is previously AG 240. And we took it out because of the wording, but by taking it out, we left out a very important concept. And that is a lot of governments will not have 12-month data. They're going to have less than 12-month data. They're going to have multi-year data. So we really haven't given any guidance for what do you do when you don't have 12-month data now that we eliminated the paragraph. So I'm suggesting this is more, I believe, more than an edit, that it's saying in situations where certain policy metrics cannot be collected and reported annually, the entity should disclose the frequency of the metrics reported and the rationale. So we need to put that out there that in all likelihood, we're not gonna have annual metrics and we gotta deal with what we got. So that, I would suggest putting it back in worded differently.
Thanks, Scott. So I think we get the point. Is everybody content that we reinstate something like AG 240 to get the sense of what Scott's just actually said, but the precise wording of that to be remitted to the drafting group to clear that? Okay. So we've then got the other AGs, haven't we? But
Scott's right. That does bring us to the very end of the page flip now on the authoritative text. And I would propose that from here, if there are any other substantive points on any of the other drafting that anybody wants to raise, who raise it now, edits can come to staff. We'll go through the editorial group. But we're looking for substantive points that haven't been discussed.
so that's on appendices B and C. Sorry, just trying to sort out scheduling. So in terms of the page flip, if there are any editorials on BCs, then those, pass those over to staff. What we will do is we're going to take a coffee break now. Then we will come back and have a look at the revised SMCs, and then we will move to a vote. Okay. Leah, can I just check? We were talking about just getting a board photo done at some stage. So, yeah, okay. So can the board just gather over here by the door and then we will sort out the exact location. But we do want to make sure because we've got all 18 board members here and at this particular point in time, I'd like to get a photo taken. Thank you. So don't go to the loo, don't go anywhere else, just gather over here by the door. Sorry, yes. So if we can come back at 5:02, please. Okay, so we finally got there with the board photo. Well done, everyone. So what we need to do now is, we're not going to wordsmith the SMCs here, and there will be places in the SMCs that will need to change as a result of the clarifications and the discussion that we had this morning. So the question is actually, have we got the right SMCs covering the right areas? Is there anything that we're missing? Is really what we're looking for at this stage. Okay, Ross.
And the SMCs are at the front of the document we just flipped through and have been updated based on the discussions earlier in the week. So as Ian said, not looking to wordsmith SMCs. They'll be updated to be consistent with the drafting we've just changed. Any that we need to add that aren't there or take out.
Liang. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure whether yeah. Okay, then Andrew.
I think probably we need to add SMC about the definition of the PPP outcome, as we just discussed. Actually, after my thinking about it again during the break, I think maybe the problem we discussed, I raised at previous session. The starting point is we have a very broad definition on outcome, but now we agree that we will not require such a broad detailed disclosure requirement. So I think maybe it is too late for us to revise the definition at this stage, but maybe one workable solution to reserve it is that we put out SMC on the definition of PPP outcome to see whether people think it is good to keep the current one, or otherwise, maybe we can have a more relevant one, such as the outcome of PPP is the impact on climate as resulted from blah, blah, blah. So this is my suggestion.
Okay, thanks, Liang. I mean, it's important in the approach, so that seems very appropriate. Andrew, and then Lynn.
Thanks. I do think there's an opportunity to combine SMC 1 and 5. SMC 1 asks, do the constituents agree that the information will be useful if we have separate disclosures for own operations versus public policy programs? 5 explains who gives disclosures about public policy programs. I think if you combine those and say, well, own ops is all entities and public policy is only those responsibility, and does this give useful information?
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So if you can just work with staff just to do the combination that you just suggested, that seems very logical. Lynn.
So just on SMCs about definitions, I questioned whether or not we actually need SMC 2, because I don't know what we're going to do with the answers we get on it if they don't like it. I don't know what. So I questioned if we actually needed that one. And then maybe perhaps building on slightly on what Liang said, when we get down to SMC 6, we only ask if they like the definition of public policy programs, not climate related public policy programs. So I wonder if you may be able to pick up at Liang's point, just in terms of having an SMC perhaps that has 3 elements to it. Do you like public policy programs, climate related public policy programs, and policy program outcomes? Have that as a sort of a bigger SMC on those definitions. So I perhaps would have a look at SMC 6, and I would propose deleting SMC 2, because I just don't think we're going to know what to do with the answers. I don't think it's going to help us.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I mean, obviously, the way we've honed that, I think that that makes absolute sense. So delete SMC2 and then we'll work on SMC6 in the way that you proposed. And I think that makes a nice holistic area for then constituents to comment on each of those elements. Good, thanks. Over Adrian.
Thank you. Just a way probably to reduce the number of SMCs and merge. Following Andrew's proposal, I would think that we could delete SMC2 and also based on Lynn's.
SMC2 is already gone.
Your mic's off.
And introduce as SMC5 by taking the first sentence that says, this exposure draft requires separate disclosures about policy, blah, 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 period. Disclosure requirements are based, etc. So it would merge the two, have it disappear as SMC2, and have a common SMC. That's it.
Okay, I think that's consistent with previous comments. Liang.
I have other 2 points related to SMC. One is about SMC3. Actually, I'm looking for except 4, after except 4, A and B. Actually, I just wondering whether they are indeed except 4. Because when I read S2 and also the wording here, actually, such as paragraph A, although the wording may not be the same, but actually the meaning is just quite similar, that you should, first you should use GHG protocol unless you think another approach is more appropriate. And the second paragraph B, actually, we have discussed in previous session. Actually, if you refer to S2, actually, it is the same, that this will not included. So I would suggest we maybe we revise the sentence, or such as the first sentence, we say primarily aligned with limited assumption. Then we say in particular A and B. But another question in my mind is the focus of this SMC. This is focused on we have aligned approach for own operation, or the focus is on paragraph A and B. So if actually our focus is on primarily aligned, so maybe we can just delete point A and point B.
Thanks, Liang. I mean, certainly when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, actually, essentially what we have done is we've aligned it and then we provided some additional guidance, and maybe actually the SMC is more about the, does that additional guide, is that additional guidance appropriate or whatever, so that puts it on the focus is then on that rather than, that's okay. You had the second point, or was that all around that? That was the kind of 2 points together. Shall I take over, Adrian, and come back to you, Liang? Adrian.
Again, I wonder if the SMCs on definitions are very useful, SMC4 and SMC6. Well, there are two proposed definitions. We had discussions about the first one, but again, if there are comments about if it proves unclear to constituents, I will provide comments. But I wonder if we need to have a SMC for that. What are we going to do? Same as previous comments by Lynn. What are we going to do if they say, no, it's not? All right, if they say, yes, it's okay. If they say, no, it's not. They would say, no, it's not, even if we don't give it the SNC in the ED. Because if they don't feel comfortable reading the definition, they will comment on that. And on this definition and other definitions, possibly. So I would delete 4 and 6, given also that SMC 7 is more important than SMC 6, I would say. And I have another comment about the wording of SMC 8. Do you agree that disclosures for PPP are only required for climate-related PPP? It's a bit like the comment I made on tangible natural resources. I mean, it's all about climate-related disclosures. So would it be unclear if we don't put the SMC in?
Well, I think on that one, the reason why we put that one there is the fact that we've focused the requirements on basically those public policy programs focused on climate rather than all public policy programs that might have an effect on climate. So that's the reason for asking that one, because that's a key feature of our approach. So that's the reason for doing that one. I mean, I can see what you're suggesting on the others, and I think probably we just need to get those members that have suggested changes and consolidations on the SMCs, basically to provide those suggestions back to staff so that staff can then consolidate the suggestions. Do you need to come back, or I just don't want to?
I want to clarify.
Okay, Celine, very quickly, but I don't want to wordsmith this. And I mean, I think we're getting the sense of where people are wanting to go on this. And I think we actually just need to take a step back, then see what we've been told, and then have another look at these.
So I just wanted to clarify, maybe it's not wordsmithing, but the questions around the definitions and where we're trying to get at what we want to understand. I don't think it's really meant to focus on the definition itself, but these two SMCs on definitions is the exact issues that we've been trying to clarify between own operations and public policy programs. And so I think that we're trying to ask if the guidance we've provided is clear. We were, previously trying to make a delineation between the two. And so are we comfortable or we're saying they will provide that, say, in the overall SMC versus asking, are you clear what is own operations, or are you clear on what is public policy program? It could be going back to wording or versus removing it completely. That's sort of yeah.
I think it comes back to my comment. Members, submit your suggestions in terms of how we consolidate, and then we will take, the drafting group will need to take a look at this in terms of, does that, to your point, Celine, what are the key features where we're differentiating and where we want input? I mean, we're boiling this down, and I think that's working quite well, but we just need to have let's just get to settle the guidance and then work out what are the key things we need the input on. Liang.
Sorry, actually I have a few other write-up, but I just scan it and to raise just more important at this stage. I think here for the climate-related PPP, the first paragraph, the writing style is a bit different to other SMC because here we give a paragraph, something like a background. But I'm just thinking whether we need to give another SMC related to this approach, because as we discussed just now, the disclosure requirement related to PPP outcome actually is very limited. So I'm just thinking whether it is still necessary to apply 4-pillar framework to this disclosure. Because as we discussed yesterday, throughout this week, actually, the blue cycle, we have put everything of the activity of reporting entity in the blue cycle. So actually, it is a complete one. And other than the blue cycle, we have the PPP program. Then actually for PPP program, we only required limited disclosure such as paragraph 12 and paragraph 26. So in my mind, maybe another approach is that for the PPP program, it may not necessary for us to apply 4-pillar framework, just limited those disclosure requirements as we write in the document. So I'm thinking whether it is necessary for us to raise SMC related to this. In any case, if we decided not to have a new SMC, I think maybe it's because we have the residue questions, the last question, that if you have other suggestion, other comment, maybe people can also comment that if you don't like the 4-pillar approach, or the 4-pillar approach seems not necessary here, maybe people can still respond to the last question. Thank you.
So the beauty of these consultations is whether we ask the question or not, people are going to give us the answers they want to give us. So the catch-all question, are there any other comments? We don't need to do that as an SMC, and we don't include that normally because our constituents aren't shy at telling us what they think. So I think and I don't think the 4-pillar SMC is all that helpful, is there might be perceptions on whether we're following the 4-pillar, but if you look at how the guidance structured, we have followed that structure. So I don't think asking the question that way is helpful at this stage. And I guess if people don't like it, they will tell us. I can tell you from my years of experience, whether you put the question or not, the people are going to raise the points that they find aren't well articulated, aren't clear to them, or the things they don't like. They're not shy on that. Where they don't tell you is what they do like. So I'm not very concerned at all with these extra BCs. So I think we've got the right amount. The balance is right. We've done what the board asked us to do earlier in the week. We've got the notes for the items to change, and the editorial group will look at the changes to the BCs. I think we should, stop it at that point, because I don't think continuing to add more on after we've taken them off now is really adding the clarity we need for the constituents who are going to have to respond to this.
The other point is to the point you raised in terms of the introductory paragraph. Basically, we have this perennial problem with SMCs because members always come in and want something different, and some want less, some want more. And the important thing on these is that actually in terms of the style, that it's consistent between natural resources and this exposure draft, because they're going to be out together. So I think as part of the editorial process, we will just make sure that there is a consistent approach between the two documents, whatever that is. And then I think going forwards, we will basically standardize on that, so that we don't keep on having these arguments backwards and forwards whenever we have a new member who likes to write short versus a new member that likes to write long. Basically, that's the style. So we will land it across these two, and then that will be the template going forwards. Okay. Any other points on SMCs? Okay. So I think with that, we are ready to move into the vote.
Excellent. So we have everybody in the room today, which makes it a little bit easier. So we'll do our normal voting process. So those who vote for the approval of the exposure draft, please raise your flags. So I have 17 flags for. So if everyone could put their flags down. Then I'll next ask if there are any abstentions. No abstentions, and I'll ask for any votes against. We have one vote against from Angela.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think that's a very important point for the board to have reached, and just want to reflect on the extent of the work that's been required to get us to this point, both by staff and board and TAs. So I would just like to recognise that in a round of applause for everyone. It's been a huge lift to get us this far. Particularly, I know, you know, across the summer we've had 2 check-in meetings. You know, I know it's been very tough on everyone involved. So just thank you very much, everyone. And we will discuss communication and launch and so on in a minute. But I just wanted to go back to Angela, because I think, you know, you outlined some of your views the other day, but just if you want to just summarise how you plan to approach it, because I think that is important and it does lead us into the communication. So Angela.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity, because it was Tuesday and it does seem like a very long time ago to me now. I think the headline is, it's for the same reasons that I outlined on Tuesday, but I would like to just take an opportunity to work through what I went through then. And I do want to convey the positive side of this project before I explain why I voted no. So again, I'd like to note that I agree that with public sector entities should make disclosures from an aligned S2 for all public sector entities and all activities. I absolutely agree with the urgency in which this board is undertaking climate-related disclosures. I think I'm very positive to think that the IPSASB is very well placed to be involved in this project and lead in this area. I absolutely agree that the policy and regulatory role and its impact on climate and the climate risks associated with that is of major interest to our stakeholders and is of the highest public interest. So I agree, who have also come to that conclusion. I also agree it is a key characteristic that is different from the private sector. So where I disagree is the ED approach to address that high public sector demand around the transparency for policy and regulatory role of government. And probably the main reason is all of the new definitions, all of the new guidance dealing with the scope of climate-related public policy disclosures, which have been discussed again over the last 3 days. I find it very confusing and complex within the way it has been put together with S2 alignment. And I am concerned about a risk that jurisdictions will also find it complex and confusing and risk actually picking up our standard. While that is what my main reason, I just want to note 3 other points. I think there will be very limited number of policies because of the definition of objective is primarily about climate. And I think the board has gone to a lot of work and angst to potentially not come up with many climate-related public policies, disclosures. I also feel that the discussions around public policy would be better at a higher level than an entity level, perhaps a sector or whole of government. And I'm very interested in how that would connect in with existing reporting frameworks such as Paris Agreement. And I also am very concerned that I think there will be a stakeholder expectation gap around the policy and regulatory role of government, because I think the focus of our disclosures are on a narrow set of positive climate disclosures. And I think our stakeholders are very interested in other public policies that have a material impact on climate and are creating significant climate risks that need to be managed by governments. So in my proposal, the way I see going forward is I would very much like to see a pure, I'll call it a pure S2, issued by this board quickly. I would like to see reporting entities in the public sector pick it up quickly and adopt it. I would like to separate the public policy and the regulatory role, the highest public interest area, I believe. And I would like that separated, and this board to address that as a separate topic from a pure S2. I'd just also like to note in an S2, I think we have some work to do around getting common understanding around value chain and what does scope 3 mean in a pure S2 for the public sector. And finally, I'd just like to say that my disagreement is not a reflection on all of the amazing work that has been done by the staff and board to get to this point. And I've come to the AV, the vote, having looked back holistically at all the debates. So I do want to assure my colleagues and the staff that I really do appreciate all the work that's gone in, and I think it will be a very positive AV in a sense that we're really trying to help constituents respond, and we can then proceed at the next step. So thank you.
Thanks, Angela. And I think it's right just to remind everybody as to how you're proposing to approach the AV, and in that positive spirit. And I think in our staff working with you on the drafting the AV, then I think that can go alongside all those comments that members have put in then in terms of SMCs, so that we really do get the right input to allow us to decide how we take this forward. But I do come back to the fact that approving an exposure draft of an entirely new series of guidance is a landmark point for this board. So thank you very much, everyone, for everything that's gone into that. And I think we look forward to getting the stakeholder feedback. And I think, Ross, perhaps I'll pass over to you on that at that point.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And I can tell you, when we were sitting a year ago in Zurich, Celine was a brand new team member. I think it was the first time she'd been together with the team all in one place when she joined us in Zurich. We've come a long way and we've covered a lot of ground. And I think probably a year ago, I didn't know if we could do it. So it's nice to be here and having just approved ED SRS1. So with that, that's probably just the start of a new phase on the staff side. So I did want to update on a few items that were covered in my program technical director report. They're also alluded to in the strategy documents, but we do have a very ambitious program of outreach planned, and we have some activities that we're working on in relation to the funding from the World Bank in our stakeholder engagement plan that we've created. So I won't articulate all aspects of the plan, but I will share some of the more important parts for members that I think would be important. So first, the regional roundtables are starting almost immediately. So we'll already start having discussions next week with constituents in Latin America at FOCAL on both natural resources and sustainability, and starting to get high-level feedback from those constituents on the proposals. And then we'll continue with a roundtable in Manila in 2 weeks' time, where again, we'll be running a similar program of roundtables. This is a broader event where we're covering more than just our material. It's a 2-day event where they're doing other capacity building and development work related to 25 countries in the Asian Pacific region. And I'll be there with another staff member, and I'm very happy to hear we'll be having one of the regional members join us to participate as well. So thank you, Noriadi, for finding the time in your busy schedule to join us for that. I think it'll be very important. We've also got an event planned later in October for the MENA region, and we're working on an event for Africa at the end of January. So keep seeing thumbs up on the screen there. I'm really liking that. Staff prefers the positive reinforcement than all of the critiquing we get all the time. So, and we're also planning events with some national standard setters as well through their working with their teams locally. So to support all of this outreach, we are, now that we've got a standard draft standard, we'll be working on an outreach toolkit that we'll have ready by the time the document's published. In that, you'll have obviously the document itself, the enhanced at a glance document that we're going to be doing to pick up a lot of the communication points we've been talking about. We'll have a high level narrative that we're creating around how to talk to stakeholders about why the IPSASB is doing this work. So not the technical details, but something me and Ian have been working on with some of our IFAC colleagues around, you know, the public interest reasons why we're doing this work, so that we communicate in a consistent way. We'll also have a PowerPoint deck similar to the one we'll be using for the roundtables that you can break up and use for any of the events you might be using. We'll have some speaking notes, and also the offer that we give to all members if you're doing outreach. If you give us enough time, staff will always help you with your slides, help you with your notes, help you with your preparation, and even join you, usually virtually, but sometimes even in person for the right events. So, you know, please take advantage of having the staff support for a lot of those activities. In addition to all of that, we're also now getting very close to starting to launch the Sustainability Implementation Forum that we've been talking to you since late last year. We've had a number of discussions with different jurisdictions and different entities in different jurisdictions that are interested in our draft guidance and looking for ways that they might be able to field test pilot either all or portions of that guidance and compare it to information data they already have, reports they already might be making, and sharing that with the forum itself and hopefully informing their responses to us through formal comment letters. We've never tried this before. It's just starting up. I'm seeing another thumbs up, so everyone thinks this is great, I guess. But yes, so stay tuned for more information on the implementation forum. We'll be following up in due course to give more information on that. We've kind of been at this point where we didn't want to put the cart before the horse in terms of spending too much time on that forum before we got the ED ready. So I'm not sure what's going on, but. Yeah, we're going to go on the deck in a minute, but I just wanted to pause there and see if there are any questions anybody might have on all of the outreach, all of the materials we're preparing. Any thoughts? Just give the board a chance to come in on any of that.
Thanks, good. I mean, I think, you know, just to underline the whole point is we know this is a new topic area. We know we're trying to reach out to new stakeholder groups, and we want to make sure that, you know, we do maximise the engagement. because all of that's going to provide us with useful information in terms of finalising this guidance and doing that as expeditiously as possible. Because there is still a building pressure to get out there and to give direction. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. I am interested in the communications and toolkit, which I think is a fabulous idea. How do you make it constituents aware of an alternative view in that process?
So I think we've done it in different ways in the past. I believe, and I need to go back and check and make sure we've done it consistently, but we normally would flag the alternative view in the at a glance. And I think we've inconsistently noted the alternative view in the past. Sometimes it's mentioned up front with the SMCs, but not always. So we'll take that away, and on that one, we'll definitely come back to you directly when we work with you on the AV to kind of make sure that we are giving it prominence and it's clear. But it will be also documented in the minutes. It'll be in the document. And we will talk about it in communication materials and work with you to make sure it's clear.
Thanks, Ross. Andrew.
Thanks. I just wondered if we could have a quick discussion on the comment period and how long that's going to go out for. I note it's currently listed as the standard comment period, but I do think that it is a very new area. A lot of our existing stakeholders would have to find new stakeholders within their jurisdiction to consult, and it is quite a long and complex document to get through. I appreciate there's the speed and the urgency at which we've got to get through this, but just the balance on that, because I would lean towards a longer comment period.
Yeah, so we are proposing 120-day comment period. I would say it will be 120-day plus, but we're not proposing extra months, more like weeks. Simply because this is likely to go out at the World Bank annual meeting launch event. That'll be around October 25th. And then we do 120 days from there. But that'll mean we're not bringing it back for a full discussion in March because unfortunately, there's just no way to make that happen. So I would give them to probably say March 1st or March 7th, which would give us some additional time. But the plan taking that forward is we wouldn't want the board to start discussing those comments at the April check-in next year so that they could have a very substantial discussion in June and start making progress on finalization of the standard. So I think that's kind of the current thinking. That's what the proposal was from staff.
Yeah, I mean, we always have this debate about comment periods, and the reality is that we basically get the comments in like about 2 days beforehand, the number of, so whatever you set the deadline as, people just take longer over it, frankly. And, understand the point that you're making. But I think if we're clear about that at this stage, we are trying to bridge across the Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere holidays and all that kind of thing. And I think we just have to be, crisp on that and say, right, okay, that's what we're doing. As Ross said, we'll just flex around the margins in terms of how it fits. But I think in the end, the key thing is that we actually we get input and we move forward with it. So I think that's the reason for the proposal. Angela, you're still in. Okay. Right. So I think with that, let us move into the wrap up in terms of Programme and Technical Director's report.
Thanks. Lee, if you could bring the slides up. So before we get into the discussion on this, I want to give credit to the photographer here. This is an actual photo from an IPSASB staff taken this week that I've used as the background, and quite a good photo. And I think, Joao, if you ever decide you've had it with standard setting, you might have a bit of a future as a photographer. Next slide, please. I don't have the clicker. So we've definitely had a busy meeting. I can't remember a meeting when we finalized so many documents and so many difficult documents. So I will read down the list because I think it's a lot of achieved by the board this week. So EDSRS 1, climate related disclosures, ED 92, tangible natural resources. We approved the strategy work program 2024-2028. Approval of IPSAS 50, exploration 4 and evaluation of mineral resources, approval of appendix to IPSAS 12 inventories, stripping costs in the production phase of a surface mine, and the leases BCs have been finalized. Now, all those are subject to editorial process, so we'll work through the finalization, but did want to give my normal thumbs up. Oh, but wait, because Andrew had reminded me over breakfast that I was not allowed to use the thumbs up anymore, so I found another little icon to use. So we'll try the nice out for a couple of meetings. But to maybe more substantive items now, with clearing off two major areas of work on the work program, that leaves a little more space for the board to start to take forward some of the other commitments that had been made in the last year or so. As we work through consultation and the mid-period work program. And so those two items are the limited scope update on IPSAS 31 intangibles, specifically for electromagnetic spectrum and air rights, things that had been discussed previously in the Tangible Natural Resources Project, and the limited scope update on making materiality judgments, which is basically the consideration of the IFRS practice statement 2 on making materiality judgments that was created a few years ago as part of their disclosure initiative. So we've never taken the time to look at that document specifically, run through our normal alignment process and decide if that would be useful for our constituents. So both of those items are now added to the work program, and we'll hopefully start our discussions on those at the December meeting. We're still, I think that brings the time to just say that we're working on the December agenda. Will be a slightly different board meeting given what we've taken off and what we're bringing on and where we are in projects. We've been working on what we'd probably call more of a convergence completion work program over the last 18 months. And I think it's going to start to change into a more, I don't want to say divergent, but open thinking, planning, setting the stage for new projects and new initiatives. So those are, other than taking and adjusting the work program for what we've completed on the previous slide, the major changes to the work program are adding in timeframes and thinking on these new committed projects.
Tony?
Thank you, Ross, for the explanation. It would be helpful if you could present at December what is the delineation between the new project, the limited scope update, making materiality judgment, to the materiality topics we will face on the project and the financial presentation of financial statements. I think they are linked, and we should have at least a delineation which is in which project.
So I can tell you now, I'm not proposing that this be the making materiality judgments gets absorbed into presentation of financial statements. It is a different piece of work. Practice statement 2 is not authoritative guidance in the IFRS literature, but it's guidance that helps you think about applying materiality. So I'm proposing that we take that forward as a separate project, as it is a separate work stream. That might mean some thinking is updated in presentation of financial statements around what we say about materiality, but I do not expect significant changes to any of the concepts and materiality related to that. It's really about applying materiality and giving users, preparers, more information on how to apply materiality effectively.
I mean, the one thing is that we are conscious that there are some slight differences floating around our literature in terms of materiality, and we do need to wrap that up and decide tactically how we're actually going to deal with that, so that essentially, you know, we do all understand, and that we've shared that understanding with our constituents about what is materiality. It's been sort of, we've kind of dotted around a bit, and as I say, there are some inconsistencies, so we just need to tighten all of that up, and then it makes absolute sense to have that, to think about that additional guidance. So we will wrap that up together. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. And Ross, in the spirit of brainstorming and noting using members where possible, I'd just like to note that the External Reporting Board in New Zealand actually did a public sector project taking the materiality judgment guidance from the IASB and brought it into our public benefit entity standards, which are primarily based on IPSAS. And the conceptual framework is also primarily based on IPSAS. So I was heads up, perhaps you could reach out to the National Standard Setter for ideas of how they did it.
We'll put that on the agenda. We're having lunch with them on Monday, so. Yeah, sorry, just to elaborate on that, it's World Standard Setters in London on Monday and Tuesday next week. We will be meeting with both the chairman and the technical director from the NZASB. So we will raise that with Carolyn and Michelle. Okay.
So I don't see any further flags. So the next thing I wanted to note that given the progress we've made, I propose the October 24, 2024 check-in meeting be canceled and give members, TAs, staff some time back from that meeting. We don't have any substantive items or urgent items that we need to get ready for approval in December or finish off from this meeting that we need board time. So I would propose that everybody gets that day back in their diaries, and unless there's anybody who putting up their flag to tell me they'd rather meet virtually and spend 3 hours together.
I think that's probably where you can use the thumbs up, Ross. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for that summary, Ross. And I think, as you said, December, we're looking forward to a really interesting meeting, and thank you very much to Abdullah and his team in terms of, all the work that's going into arranging the meeting in Riyadh. We will be doing a lot of sort of breakouts and general, discussion on various topics. Not only new projects, but also we've got some key issues we're going to be getting into on presentation of financial statements and so on. So it will feel very different, not only in terms of location, but also in terms of content. So I think it'll be a really good meeting. I would just like to record the thanks to everyone on the staff for the material, for all the hard work that's gone into putting together the material that's enabled us to take that, basically it gets that long list of approvals. It has been a very heavy lift. And I know but I think just thank you very much, staff, for the great teamwork. But also thank you very much, everybody, for contributing to making this meeting a success. And of course, that means to our colleagues as well in the commission. It's not easy running a meeting like this with all the security and so on right at the centre of the commission. But it has been a great meeting. So thank you everyone for that. So in terms of, I think that concludes the formal business for this meeting. What we will do is break. I think, are we okay on lunch? So thumbs up that lunch is ready outside. So we will now break for lunch. Board members, we do have a wrap up in camera session afterwards, and my suggestion is, given the time at the moment, that we come back in here for 12:30. In the meantime, Thank you very much to everyone else, to TAs and observers and public gallery, for sticking with us on this week. Really just safe travels, everybody. Enjoy the time back in October, and we look forward to seeing you in Riyadh in early December. Thank you very much, everyone.